Sometimes the button takes a little bit. There we go. Now we're live.
Live.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on. Could you give us a little bit of an intro to yourself, who you are, and what you got going on?
Sure. My name's Troy Eckert, and I'm living currently in San Clemente, California right now. Gosh, I mean, where do I start, really? It's such a long-winded sort of thing. But I mean, ultimately, I guess the reason why we're here today is me and a partner from a previous company I worked for a very long time called Volcom got together and started a men's yoga apparel brand. So yeah, it's been a couple years in the making, and man, we're in just like straight up startup mode, and just doing everything and anything, and it's been an awesome experience. It's super challenging at the same time, but really really fun, and just feels good to be doing something that I'm passionate about and interested in, and after all these years of doing all kinds of different things. So I feel like it's a home that we've found that we're just going for it. So yeah, I mean, I grew up in California my entire life, born here, and kind of bounced around for a long time, and then just ended up in Southern California when my parents moved from Northern California down to here, probably when I was about, gosh, sixth grade, whatever age that would be. And yeah, and then found the ocean around that time, and then that's kind of when things really started to change for me. Was around that time, around sixth grade. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And
man.
I had actually kind of done a little bit of digging just to see if I could find out a little bit more information about you, so I didn't look like a total idiot with different questions. And it was funny seeing your interview kind of deal that you did with your partner Derek. And just it was cool to kind of hear a little bit more about your background with Volcom. And it seems like what you went through with the start of that brand and kind of what you're doing now, it seems like there's a lot of parallels between the two. Is that kind of what you're getting, like the full circle come back to a lot of that?
Yeah, I would say so. But the biggest difference is my age. And when we started Volcom, I was 18. So I was just a kid. I didn't even know what business was. It was literally, we were just like living it, so where now it's like, I worked at Volcom for 20 years and basically kind of worked my way up through the company and, gained a lot of experience. So this time around is definitely different. I feel like, it's a different stage of my life where I feel like I have a lot more to lose,
Yeah.
but a lot more to gain too at the same time. If that makes sense. But yeah, there's definitely parallels. I mean, absolutely. I mean, the startup thing is just, it's wild. And it reminds me of when we started Volcom, because I was doing everything. Like, I was basically put on as a team writer, and I was the second employee. I wasn't an employee. I was just surfing basically. And, so yeah, I was the third employee there, and they put me on as a surfer basically to be sponsored for Volcom, and and then it kind of ended up, he's like, okay, let's get together, let's get a team going, and get some guys involved and this sort of thing. So kind of got my friends involved really at the end of the day, and and at that time it was like, there was production. I was driving to LA, picking up hats, and at that point in the early stages we were all of our production and manufacturing was done in Los Angeles. So I was going up there daily, and then I'd do like a little bit of team stuff during the day, and then at the the second half of the day I'd do shipping. So I was literally just doing everything, and even at that point I didn't even know what I was going to be doing at all. Like, was I going to be like a sales guy? Was I going to be in the marketing? Was I going to be a shipping manager? Like and that was the beautiful thing back in the day, was like, we had no idea. Nobody had any idea, and Richard, the president, was, I mean, he kind of, I think, maybe steered me a little bit into the marketing world. And luckily for me, that was really where I took hold of that, and was really my thing, was marketing. And, in retrospect, looking back, I'm really thankful that was, what I landed on, because that's kind of one of the more fun pieces of a brand or an experience at a company, is to like really like build it from a marketing perspective. So
Definitely. And I think that's kind of where you get to, I mean, maybe not necessarily when you're in startup mode, but kind of when you get to a point where you're a little bit bigger is when you get to play with other people's money and do creative things with
Totally.
what you have in front of you. And you mentioned kind of that full circle deal, being a little bit older now and being back to like that startup mode. Do you find that decisions are a little bit harder just based on, you know, having all this previous knowledge where you can say like, oh, if I do this, this might happen. And, you know, because I think when you're younger, you almost have this like partial blindness to all these negative things that could happen because you're just so pumped about doing what you love that you know, you don't necessarily have all that experience behind you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for sure, it's a different sort of mindset, you know. Back then, like you said, it's like you're just kind of like we were just living it straight up, like living it, and now you're kind of having to like think a little bit more about like, you know, the repercussions of every decision that you're making in the moment, and no, I'd say it's definitely a different trip. Not only that, it's like how drastically things have changed, you know, when it comes to just like, you know, the digital world. And I mean, when we started Volcom, it was like straight up print ads. I mean, we didn't have computers for the first probably 4 years, you know. I mean, we started in 91, and Richard's dad, who was like the, you know, one of the main investors and the main guys involved, he was like super anti computers, and it was like so funny. Anyways, I'm kind of like veering off of your question, but ultimately, yeah, I think that things are just definitely a lot different than they were back then, for sure. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I know. What things stand out a little bit more to you that are significantly different nowadays than there were before? I'm assuming like social media, the whole digital kind of space has to be just wild.
Well, yeah, and then I mean, for us, like it's funny because like when we kind of started thinking about this brand, we were, you know, it was almost like, let's do everything the opposite of how we did it at Volcom, you know, and so on so many levels, from like ground up basically. So, I mean, from manufacturing to sourcing to, you know, the way we, you know, who we bank with, all the way on down to that sort of thing. So, and then obviously all the way to the digital marketing space, and just the fact that we're direct to consumer only. Like we basically made the conscious decision to cut out brick and mortar. You know, not to say that it'll never happen, but at this point in time for us, especially since we're making our product in the US and sustainably, in a sustainable manner, it's expensive. So, you know, by the time that it gets to the end consumer, if we were to go into a store, it would be just like crazy pricing. So I'm not interested in that. I want it to be fair to people. And, you know, so at the end of the day, that's a big deal for us. But ultimately, yeah, in the digital world, it's just like, I mean, like I said before, like we were running print ads at Volcom, and, you know, slides, and just, I mean, the whole digital, I mean, basically I left in 2010 from Volcom, around 2010. And that was like right when Instagram started. So like that gives you some sort of like perspective on timing. Yeah. And so I was still dealing with, you know, all those, you know, all the dinosaur type of things back then. So now like being direct to consumer, and then just, you know, fighting to find your audience in the digital space is so different, you know. And going into it, it's funny because like, you know, we look at it and we're like, holy shit, like this is way harder than we thought. You know what I mean? Like there's a sea of just like everybody's trying to like, you know, gain attention, and whatever it is, if it's a celebrity or a person or a brand or whatever it is, there's so much noise digitally. So to really like craft your voice and really be heard in a meaningful way is like, it's really difficult. But for us, it's like, it's really important too, you know, like we don't just want to spray and just to spray. It's just like, okay, what are we gonna talk about, and how is it creating value for people, for ourselves, and then, you know, hopefully people will engage eventually. So that's sort of, I mean, those are the biggest differences basically.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think even with all that noise, the positive aspect that's come out of a lot of that social digital side of things is that it really, people have gotten, their BS meters have gotten so much better. And so when you put out things into the world that suck, or that, you know, aren't really close to who you are and what you want to do as a person, they can really sniff it out. And so I think that was one reason why I was drawn to your guys' stuff with Kazem when I had first seen it, was because it just seemed like through and through the entire business, you guys were really just living what you wanted to do, and it was really true. And I think that's that thing that helps you cut through the noise in the social space is, really doing what you want to do and making that known, and not really like, trying to hide behind something.
Yeah, totally. We're just like open kimono. We're just, it's who we are, and like it's what we're into, and it seems like a perfect space in my life and my partner Derek. We're literally hustling so hard right now. It's like, it's classic. I mean, but at the end of the day, it's like, it means something. It's not just this like, oh, we're working for somebody else or we're doing this or that. It's kind of whatever, but it's, at the end of the day, it's just like, this actually like, this really means something to us. So if we can continue to do that and, grow our business and do cool stuff and, partner with cool people and build communities, things like that. Like those are that's what I'm interested in.
For sure.
So.
And so you had mentioned real briefly there about how you had kind of purposely made some decisions to go against how they were doing things at Volcom toward the end there as you were kind of transitioning out, which I thought was really cool because it seemed like that's how you guys had initially started Volcom at the same time.
Yeah.
Can we back up a little bit and like go through the progression of like, okay, so you've been at Volcom however many years, you've learned all this stuff. How did you start to kind of transition into the Kazem side of things, and how did you end up making the decisions that you did that, came to fruition in what Kazem is now?
Yeah. Well, I think we can probably kind of trace it back to around 2006, which would be sort of the year that I was introduced to yoga. And that was really when it, it kind of came into my life, at that point. And prior to that, I'm super active, and I've been, surfing and snowboarding and riding dirt bikes and all these sorts of, dangerous things for my entire life. And I broke off really bad, like a lot, and then it came to a point where I was so locked up all over my body, basically, where, my physical therapist at the time, he was like, hey, you should really think about like checking out yoga. Like it could be really, really good for you. And I'm just like, I don't know about that, dude. Like, that's for chicks. Like, I'm whatever. I'm like a manly man. Like I don't, tight pants, whatever. Like, so I remember being a little bit closed off to it. But then I remember when I went and did it for the first time, it was just like the most challenging thing that I had ever done in my life, and I just was like completely humbled, like instantly, mentally challenged, physically challenged, all of it. I was just like, wow. So kind of, it was, right then when it really hit me of like, hey, if I want to like continue as I get older to be as active as I want to be, I need to do something about it. I need to get through all these old injuries too. So yoga was really, it was a door that just flung straight open for me, and so 2006, and that was right after Volcom went public too in 2005. So I was under a massive amounts of stress. So I was running a public company. I forget, how old was I in 2006? 10, whatever, plus about a while ago. So I was young, and for running a public company, and so I was in charge of global marketing, and I was just like really stressed out. So yoga really helped me sort of tune into myself and really allowed me to be more calm and not stress as much. So that was another huge benefit that I had no idea I was going to get from it. So it was sort of a twofold physical, mental sort of thing. So then, fast forward, just continued to do my practice and kind of went a little bit like roller coaster with it here and there. I think I got a couple injuries in the meantime. So then, 2010, I ended up moving to Kauai for a few years. And that was kind of like when I really parted Volcom, was 2010, as far as the global marketing director of Volcom, and sort of created another position for me at Volcom in Hawaii for about a year. And then, and then when I was in Hawaii was when I really tapped into yoga even more, because I had the time to do it. Excuse me. So I was surfing a ton, doing a ton of yoga, and it was just a really good time for me. Fast forward, so a couple years later, ended up moving back to California, got a divorce, went through all that turmoil in my life too, which was really, really tough and gnarly. And I have 3 daughters, so it was a really shitty time. And that was in 2013. So during that time again, I tapped back into yoga was always there. Obviously surfing was there. Surfing is like my blood. That's who I am. I'm a surfer, ultimately through and through. But the yoga thing was really a huge thing for me, helping me through my divorce situation as well. So, just tapped in more and more and more, and just was really into it. And then, I hadn't been like thinking about starting a brand or anything at that point. I was consulting, doing some agent work for some surfers, a couple guys. I was helping them get sponsored and things like that. So just doing small little things. And I was feeling a bit frustrated kind of with the consulting gig a bit. I felt like I was kind of banging my head against the wall a little bit. But at the same time, there were some fun projects that I did do. But again, like I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start a brand. Like I'm going to start another Volcom. I'm going to start this or that. I had actually like in my head kind of thought about the action sports thing again. I'm like, shit, maybe give this thing another go. But I'm like, you know what? There's no freaking way to duplicate what we did with Volcom, So that thing kind of tabled. And the other thing was also for me, it was, at that point I was 42 and I'm like, I'm a 42-year-old man. Like, I don't know what a 15-year-old's thinking, and that for me, that wasn't very exciting. So ultimately, long story short, kind of the whole Kozm idea really just spawned out of like literally one day walking out of yoga and I was like, I'd been wearing my board shorts and just a normal t-shirt. And I'm like, shit, I'm going to go look online to see what I could find. And I was just searching online and, I was across like Lulu and Prana and just the typical like big brands. And the brand Vuori out of Encinitas had just launched at the time, Chris Miller's brand. And I saw that and I was like, wow, that looks really cool. And it was specific to men's yoga as well. Like, I'll check this out, and kind of looked into it. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not gravitated towards this either. So it was really then that I was like, shoot, wow, maybe there's something here. Maybe this could be a cool thing, And then I started to just ask around to some people that I really, my mentors and people I trust and whatnot. And they were just like, shit, that's a pretty good idea. Men's yoga apparel. Wow. And, so I just kind of stewed on it for a bit. And then I ended up talking to my partner now, Derek, who's also been, he was at Volcom for 20 years as well. And he was doing all the merchandising for the men's line. And then also for the last 8 years, he was in charge of all the sustainability at Volcom. So he was global VP of sustainability and a good friend of mine. So it was almost by chance that we just like got on the phone and I basically was calling him to be like, hey, I was like, hey, I had this idea and I know that like, if I'm going to do it, like I would definitely want to go on a more sustainable, in a more sustainable route with the business. And I'm like, you're the man. Like, what do you think? And literally in that phone call, I was like, wait a second, dude, you need to do this with me. It was just one of those moments. And he was at Volcom at the time. He was full-time. He was full-time still. And he's like, really? Yeah. Like, I've been kind of like trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. And, he was at that point, that 20-year mark is a gnarly point. I mean, 10 years is gnarly, but 20 is really gnarly. You're just like, who am I? What am I doing? Yeah. Where am I going? What's next? So the timing was perfect for him. So yeah, we just kind of peeled off and started to really just brainstorm how we wanted to do this. And I'm super long-winded here, but yeah, it was really going back to like, okay, like starting from scratch. If we had the opportunity to do it all over again, we're not going to start just another brand. Like, this is not just another clothing brand. It's like, hey, let's just peel away all the layers and start from scratch. Like, number one, like, starting with like a B Corp. Okay, we're going to be a benefit corp. We're not going to just be a normal S Corp or a C Corp. Like, like that's one thing. Okay, banking. Like, let's think about our banking. Like, are we going to go with a traditional big bank like that, is pumping their dollars into like the oil projects and things like that are just, horrible for the environment and just for the people and the planet and whatnot? No, let's not do that. Okay, let's challenge ourselves to like find a bank that actually is investing into like good stuff, for the environment and the people. And we found a bank up in San Francisco called New Resource Bank, who was super, it's a small little bank and They've been amazing. So we know we feel good about like where our money's being invested and things like that. So all those types of decisions, manufacturing, okay, upcycled, recycled. I mean, all these decisions that we've made are hard. It's not like, I mean, anybody can just be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go start a brand. Let's get a bank. Let's just, we're an S corp. We're gonna make it in China. We're like, it's just like, it's all about low cost. Like, I mean, anybody can do that. That's very easy, and people do it all the time. So I guess for us, it just, again, going back to not just building another brand, I wanted it to be meaningful. And in retrospect, it was a ton of work, but I'm really proud of what we built thus far. And I mean, we just launched, we're in like straight up scrappy startup mode. So who knows if it'll actually work, if it's sustainable, but it doesn't really matter to me, because like, I feel like for us, even if this thing were to like plow into the ground, we'd feel good about like how we set it up, and who knows, it could launch us into our next project. But I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about, Kozm and it's succeeding. So that's sort of my long-winded answer for you.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna ask you to keep going on that, because I think we're still going down an awesome road, and I don't want to kind of like stop you right there. But so how, like, where did the decision come from on your end to try and consciously make those decisions differently than what was going on before? Like, were there certain things that you saw within Volcom that you would have liked to change? Is that like the catalyst, or like where did that thinking come from?
At the time I was so deep in it. It was really, a lot of it was after, sort of in retrospect, of like, and I don't want to like put this big like light on Volcom. I think it's really in general, especially in the action sports industry, which is the industry that I know, and just knowing how things are done and how people, build products and things like that. Excuse me. But it was really sort of a catalyst of the entire industry, where it was like, hey, let's do things differently, and especially with a yoga brand, it's like, of all brands, it's like, we have an obligation to do it in a meaningful way, I believe so. So, it was kind of a combination of a lot of different things, really. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. So and I think you had kind of touched on it there a little bit. It was like, I really want to try and focus a little bit more on the Kazem side of stuff, because I think like there are learnings that you can take from your time with Volcom, but the cool thing to me is that you transitioned that into something even cooler, at least to me, because I think a lot of people get hung up on like, oh, there's this big brand, you're doing all this awesome stuff, you've been there for so long, blah blah blah. Like they kind of like try and put you on a pedestal or something for something that you previously did, and it's like, okay, we're on to this thing now, like there are things from that I can take learnings from, but like we're pushing toward this other thing that's not, that's behind us, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's just different time. It's a different time too. I feel like just with what's going on in our world, it's like there's a lot of unrest happening. So be kind to ourselves and be kind to our planet, and and not in a hippy dippy way. It's just like just a reality way. It's just like, this is real. Like, like, I mean, our motto at Volcom is youth against establishment, and I feel like there's sort of a youth against, maybe it's like old guys against establishment, or whatever. Nowadays, it's kind of like a new, for me, that's what I feel. Like when we started Volcom, it was like youth against establishment, like, F the status quo, what was happening with, I mean, it was like during that time of like Nirvana and like, that whole like grunge kind of movement and stuff. And I feel like now it's like we're in this whole other sort of like world and movement of sort of, against establishment in a more positive way, if that makes sense, so, and that was even back then at Volcom too, was like, it was about like positivity, and it was about freedom, really, at the end of the day, freedom to be yourself and express yourself. So I feel like now with Kazem, like that's kind of what I feel what this brand is. And I just think that the way we position it is it's just different, it's just so different. It's just polar opposites, but in the same sense, it's kind of like, like not fuck the status quo, but like let's challenge the status quo with how we do business, and do it responsibly. Like at the end of the day, like how do you feel about every decision you're making? How do you feel about like, the people that are manufacturing your goods, or where your goods are coming from, or I mean, it's kind of sort of endless, so So I think that's like for us is a big thing, is to really just like challenge ourselves with every single decision that we have. It's like, is this going to be a long-term decision? You know, it's so easy to make short-term decisions, you know, that are just like, okay, this is whatever, doesn't matter, just short-term thinking. But it's like when you make a decision with long-term in your thoughts, like that's really where I think you're going to make a difference. And it's difficult too, like especially in the digital world today. It's like everything's so instantaneous. You just want instant gratification always. And I've learned that, you know, even going into this project, it's like still, you know, it's gonna take time, and you have to have patience. Like even in this digital crazy instant world, it's like we got to all have patience. And I think it just goes across the board with everything, with you know, building a company or doing anything really meaningful, you know. And yeah, it's just different now, but it's a good time, and we're fired up, you know. We're just like stoked, and it's been great too, because people have just been like very receptive of the brand, you know. And I just hear it constantly, like, wow, it's such a good idea, and it's so cool how you're doing things. And you know, transparency is something that we haven't really touched on, but that's a big thing for us too. It's like we've literally opened our books for the most part, you know, of like our costing. You know, we tell people exactly how much things cost. And you know, I got that idea from Everlane, which, you know, I saw what they were doing with their transparent pricing, and I thought that that's awesome. Like people should know, you know, how much their garments cost all the way on down, and what the markups are, because, you know, ultimately it's like, I mean, in the whatever the fashion, you know, the high-end fashion world, the markups are just astronomically crazy. I mean, literally it's a ripoff at the end of the day, you know, for people. So, and people are getting smarter, and people are digging under the covers, and the accessibility for people just to Google stuff is just like right there, you know. And so again, for us, it was like the transparency model was a big part of like who we wanted to be and how we wanted to you know, show our customers or fans or whatever you want to call it, that how we're doing things really, and not be like ashamed of anything, you know. Like you can go on our site and literally click ingredients, product story, and you can see exactly where everything came from, who's manufacturing it, basically who's touched it, you know. So it's you will know pretty much everything you need to know, I think, when it comes to like a product, like building a product, you know. So and so yeah, you know, and we're learning. It's like it's funny because we're always like wanting to do more and more, and like we could do this, but we could do this, but we could do this, but just like strip it back. Like we've already done a lot, you know. Like we're already putting ourselves out there in a manner that's pretty fresh and new and different. And so just, you know, kind of we just need to like kind of circle back and build on those things, and tell the stories about, you know, the people behind the products, and the people that are, you know, designing our products, and you know, all of our regulars, and the people, sort of the ambassadors, and, you know, tell all those stories as well. So that's been fun. And I'm excited to just continue to like tell those stories and build that content, because for me, like was a big background for me from Volcom, was filmmaking and things like that. So I really enjoy that piece of it. And with a brand these days, I mean, content is so important, and especially storytelling, and doing it in a quality, meaningful way. Also, I think, like you said before, like there's just so much just crap just being blah 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 spat out there, but the bullshit detectors are getting better, like you said, and I truly believe that. And so I think when you go in to like build these types of you know, content pieces, you need to really like think about that again long term. It's like, yeah, we could just throw anything out there, like what the fuck, who cares? But at the end of the day, it's like, you know, is it providing value to the end customer or your fans? And can you stand by it too, and be like happy with it, you know, knowing that like it came from your heart and soul type of thing. So, I mean, those are my thoughts anyways. And I hope that you know what I mean? I hope that continues. And I feel like we've sort of seen that like wave of just like as much as possible. And it's like, okay, wait, take a step back. Like it's not about quality, or sorry, it's not about quantity. It's about quality at the end of the day. So, and I mean, for us at Volcom, like I feel like we sort of challenged the status quo back in the day too with our filmmaking. I mean, we went in, not to go too far back, but it's sort of relevant to what we're talking about with Kozm. But you know, when we made our films, we were spending a ton of money. Like we were all of our films were shot in 16 millimeter film and Super 8 film, and that was when digital was really getting going, and like video, and it was just like movie makers were making movies for like pennies on the dollar with video back in the day early, and we were like spending like $250,000 on like films, but ultimately those films really set the tone for Volcom and who we were at the time. And looking back, it's like I don't regret spending spending those extra dollars on those types of projects, because I know that those were the foundation of like Volcom. So I think for now, like learning that and moving into Kozm, I want to build like killer content. So
yeah, and all those things are what I think was really cool about how I had seen you guys when I just stumbled across you online, was that you guys are just being so open about all the stuff that you were doing, and it was really cool to see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that you and Derek were doing, like with the manufacturers, and that you're, like while you're creating the beanies and you're seeing all this stuff start to finish. And so even if you don't really know what the brand is at that point, you're more interested because you're like, okay, I'm seeing this being made now. Whereas like, I don't think I could name a single other company at this point that off the top of my head that is doing that. And it's cool because it's just back to that point with there's not really any barriers anymore. And so we can do things like this, like a podcast where you can broadcast all of this really cool stuff and background as to why somebody started a brand, and, like what you're trying to do, and all these like not only pain points, but also cool learnings and, successes that you've had, so that if someone else wants to go try and do the same thing, they can be like, oh yeah, I listened to Troy talk about all this cool stuff, and now I'm going to go make something awesome too. And so it's like that weird interplay, like we were talking about with the digital stuff, where there's a lot of bullshit, but if you use it for good, it can really, balance things out again.
Totally. Like I love the whole podcast world. Like it's amazing. I don't know if you've watched Startup on Gimlet Media.
I don't think so.
Listen to Startup. It's so amazing.
I'm gonna have to check that out. You're gonna have to send me a link to that one. Right?
Yeah, I'll send you a link to that. But it's like it's just it's a podcast literally about like startups, and it's called Gimlet Media is the company, and they basically recorded their whole process of like starting up their company, and it's just so raw and rad. And then now here they are, like they've actually built their company, they got investors, and now they're like like they're talking about like they're doing podcasts with new startups now too and stuff. And it's just like, it's cool for anybody who is in a startup right now. Like I suggest listening to that for sure, because it'll definitely help you, because there's times, when you're just like, holy shit, like we're going out of business before we are in business, or, or investing and like figuring out how to like raise money, and, do you go scrappy? Do you like go for the gold? Or, it's like, there's so many different avenues that you can take, and there's no true recipe for it. It's literally just like, it's like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just kind of renegade really at the end of the day of how you do those sorts of things. So, but yeah, I suggest it. It's really good.
Yeah. And on that same point, it's crazy because when you get into those little startup modes, you really realize how much your decision-making affects what is then coming after that, because you're like, okay, there's literally so many decisions in front of me right now, and I'm going to have to pick one. And based on that one, we're going to be in a totally different space in a month. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to have to reevaluate everything all over again.
Totally.
And then take another step forward.
Totally. And I don't know, we've gone through it like over and over again of like, okay, what are we doing? Like, are we going to just like continue to kind of like, put in little bits and pieces here and do it ourselves as long as we can? Or do we like, shit, let's just get on the road and like, try and raise $1 million, like, that type of thinking. And excuse me, but at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know, we feel good about just like the slow mover right now. We're just like, damn, let's just take a step back. Like, we don't need to like conquer the world in like a couple months or 6 months or even 12 months, really. At the end of the day, it's like, let's just like, let's just go and do what we know how to do, and do it in a way that feels comfortable. There's not this massive amount of pressure on us or stress of like, okay, we gotta like, the investors and this and that. And, money definitely fixes problems, but it also makes problems. So it's kind of that fine line, right? And I definitely don't have the answer to it at all by any means. But at this point in time right now, like we have a plan of like what's comfortable for us. And I feel like if we can sort of get through this next little kind of stretch of time, we could be set up, really well to potentially bring in some investment, but yeah, so that's like the startup founder's dilemma is the whole like, capital raising and things like that and how you do it. And I mean, for some people, they don't have a choice. They don't have any money to put it in on their own. And luckily from Volcom, for both of us, we've been able to fund this thing on our own to a certain point. But there definitely comes a certain point where you're like, okay, well, I'm done putting money in,
Yep.
So and you need money to grow. So it's just part of the deal.
Yeah. So can I ask more about the slowness factor that you kind of just mentioned? Because I think in a lot of people that end up trying to do their own thing within the action sports world, there's that level of aggro that's behind everything where it's like, go, I need to be on the next thing, I need to be doing this, and you're just kind of like this high functioning thing. Like, how did that come about where you're kind of able to tap into that more let's chill out type of thing? Did yoga play a part in that, or is it just age, or all of the above?
Probably all the above. I mean, I would say yoga for sure. Like it's just like the yoga practice is a lifelong thing. Like you're never gonna master it. It's like, and you cannot rush it. It's like you have to go in and put in your time and be on the mat and just, your body's going to tell you at what pace you're going to go, basically. And I feel like if you listen to your body and listen to what's going on, even in your head as well, you can really sort of let things happen naturally. So I feel like that's sort of the same thing with like the business. It's sort of the same thing a little bit. It's like, don't overthink it. Don't go crazy of thinking you need to conquer the world in the next 24 hours. It's really not going to happen anyways, but, take a step back and really just like do things in a way that's like really means something and you can feel good about ultimately. So, I mean, for us, that's just like, we feel good to like have that slow mentality. And I think it just comes down to like the slow fashion. It's almost like the slow fashion movement too. There's the fast fashion movement and there's the slow fashion movement. And I think that people are becoming a lot more conscious to that. And however that may be from a sustainability side to a made in the USA or fair trade or whatever that is. I mean, these types of things are not easy and take time. And like I said, it's very easy to get anything made in China or, overseas where it doesn't really, I don't think it's really solving a big picture problem of like, we don't need another fast fashion brand. We need people that are really like giving a shit. And I saw actually you had a renewal workshop on your podcast, and we're working with them as well. Awesome. So that's super cool. And I mean, closing the loop, like it's like that's what we need to be like concentrated on, and not like just like filling up our landfills a little bit more and more with just like piles of just like clothing, cheap clothing too, that literally just disintegrates in the wash type of thing. So yeah.
I completely agree. So then pulling that back to kind of the beginning of how you started Kazem, how did you end up going about finding the people that you were going to partner with in order to make the goods that you kind of got into? And then how did you deal with trying to make sure that you were able to create what you needed on small runs, but that, if something were to happen where you needed to make more in bulk, that you were able to kind of deal with scaling at a certain point? Or was that just not even on the map at all?
Yeah, I mean, luckily with our background, like we have plenty of resources when it comes to manufacturing. So we partnered up with a company called Textiles, which is in Spain, and it's basically upcycling used scraps, cutting room scraps, and also used clothing that are in good condition, and they literally just take it and turn it into new fabrics and whatnot. So that was a connection that we had prior to with Volcom. So his name's Isaac Nicholson, super good friend. He's the guy's insane. So he was the one that really like tapped us in the whole like recover process. And ultimately that, our t-shirts and beanies and basically 90% of our stuff. I mean, we don't have that, we have a tiny line, but like 90% of our stuff is all made from recovered goods, which is like, the story is incredible. So, and then going back to sort of the LA manufacturing part of it, same thing, like with like the designer that we're working with and the production gal we're working with as well. They sort of, helped us find the factories, and we've actually been through, we're on our third now. So that has been the most challenging part, was finding a factory that could really that really was into what we were doing. And also, we want to make sure that things are be done right there as well. They're doing their business right as far as with their people that are sewing and cutting and just building the products. So we've finally wound up in a really good space. And then also the small batches. I mean, we're tiny, so it's like a lot of people just don't even want to like deal with the small quantities, and which is understandable because it's a business as well. But at the same time, you got to start somewhere. So I'm super stoked on the company that we're working with now. They're called Lefty Productions, and they're in downtown LA. And this woman named Marta runs the factory, and it's just a tight little unit, and just it's such a good little spot for us. We're so happy to be involved with them, and they're all into our small batches and things like that. So it's totally cool, and we can scale with them a bit too. So it's a good little home for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then in that same regard, talking a little bit more about what you were mentioning with your site about how you kind of show how much money goes into what piece of each garment and how much you're able to make off of that. Did you create any sort of like 1 year, 3 year plan financials to make sure that was, able to feed into itself? Or was it just like, okay, we're going to just try and break even now, and then when we get to some other step, we'll look at it again and kind of, go from there?
Yeah, I mean, you have your margins that you want to hit. So with a direct consumer model, you inherently have much better margins. But for us, it's like, our margins aren't nearly what they could be for sure, because of the way that we're doing our manufacturing our products. So yeah, I mean, honestly, we just like looked at it as like a kind of a big picture, like margin piece of like, okay, are we hitting like a certain margin that we feel comfortable with? Is it like 80%? Like some people have, like, no, like, but I'm not interested in that, And so, so we kind of had our top line thought on that. And then like in showing the costing, it's like anybody who knows manufacturing can look at it and see what our margin is, So we're basically, we'll show you, and sometimes with these even smaller quantities, we've been like, our margins are like basically nothing, you know what I mean? But it's like, we're putting it out there, and it's like, because we're doing such small sample, I mean, we are treated as sample runs sometimes, because of the small batches. But ultimately, there was definitely thought behind it. It wasn't just like, oh, like who, whatever. It's like Derek's very methodical. He's the methodical side to the brand, where I'm like the more like kind of creative, whimsical, visionary type of person. He's just like, hey, dude, we only have this much money, and which is awesome. So we balance each other out very, very well. And so yeah, that's kind of the story behind that, I guess.
Cool. So then can you take me through like some of the bigger steps looking back, like milestones that you hit? Because from what I've seen, you kind of like technically started Kazem in like 2015, and it's now, like middle of 2017. What kind of like, points did you hit along the way, and what kind of, slip ups were there in that whole sort of deal?
Well, I think, I mean, really technically, I mean, we were just behind. Like we thought we were going to, launch probably 6 months before we did, which is kind of typical, I think, to a lot of startups, for product or website design or whatever it was. But yeah, we technically launched, like officially launched in November of 16. So that's really when we were actually like public out in the market, and we launched with like t-shirts, hats, beanies, and a very small line. And, and then we didn't release a short until a couple, like a month and a half ago, which we sold out of, which was awesome. And but you know, in retrospect, I would have liked to like launch with the short, but just for whatever reason, just fabrics and just like testing and things that we wanted to come out with something totally different, which I feel like we achieved that. But I would think that, I mean, there's a lot of like hiccups that we had from manufacturing side to like building the site to just like, you know, development. I mean, everything takes double amount of time, or maybe triple amount of time, and a triple amount more in cost. You know, it just, you think you're going to spend X and just triple it basically, or you think it's going to be on this date and just like triple that date. You know, and I think if you can like be okay with that sort of thing, then you'll be okay. And I remember in the moment, like, I mean, I'm the type of, I'm pretty like deadline driven, especially just from my Volcom days. It's just like one of those things. It was always like, you have to hit deadlines. And I remember not hitting a few, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's like the end of the world. You think like everybody's watching, but really nobody's watching.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I think that you're your own worst enemy when it comes to that sort of thing. And, you know, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and I put a lot of pressure on myself too, especially because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's your reputation of like, you know, you're putting yourself really out there, you know, and we made the conscious decision to actually like identify us within the company. It's like, you know, we're in the about page. It's my story, you know, it's how it's all just right there for you. So ultimately it's like, you have this sort of like kind of pressure that you put on yourself of like, you know, holy shit, like we got to put it out on time. And also like, is this even the right thing to do? You know, you just always questioning yourself. I think that the amount of questioning that happens as you're like building any company is just like endless. And I feel like ultimately you have to just put yourself out there. I mean, you can question yourself to the grave basically and never do anything, you know? So I think that like, you got to get it to a point where, you know, it's always going to be, you're always going to look at it and be like, this can be better. Of course. Well, the beautiful thing with being online is you can just iterate till the wheels fall off, change things, you know, whatever. But at the same time, I think it really comes down to like putting yourself out there, and just don't be afraid to do it, because your fear is the thing that's really going to hold you back at the end of the day. So
was that a change from how you had kind of dealt with things at Volcom? Because I would assume that 20 years in, well, maybe not the entire time, but most of it in an office setting, and then all of a sudden going to your own thing where you can, you know, kind of divert your energy a little bit differently, that's kind of, you know, a change or a bit of a shock.
Yeah. And I think for me too, especially now as I'm older, it's like, there's got to be a lifestyle kind of a major lifestyle balance for me, you know, like, it's like, I still enjoy surfing a ton. Like I still, you know, I want to, you know, I have my 3 daughters, like I want to enjoy them. Like, you know, I'm going to yoga and doing those sorts of things. And I'm not going to be like a victim to the desk, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, you got to move around. Like you got to, you know, I want to move around. I don't want to be just chained to an office or a desk. And the quality of life, I think, will inherently just benefit your business, you know, whatever it is you're doing for your work. If you have the flexibility to do that, obviously. And with a startup, it's like, it's our thing. So luckily I do have the flexibility. We do have the flexibility to do that. But I think that's something like that we've instilled in the DNA of the brand. It's like, okay, you gotta, like, you know, family comes first. You gotta be healthy, you know, eat healthy, you know, do your yoga practice, whatever it is you're doing, surfing, like all those things are gonna make you happy at the end of the day and keep you engaged and stoked to like work on the brand, you know? So, I mean, you know, right now we don't have an office. Like it's just, I'm in my house, you know, and Derek's in his house. I'm in San Clemente. He's in Costa Mesa.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a third party distribution facility that we work with. So, yeah, it's just, I think quality of life's huge. You know, that's a big thing for me, but at the same time it's a startup and you have to grind but I don't mind working into the evening. Like I don't, you know, there's no off switch. So it's like, if I want to go surf, you know, mid morning, just to like feel good about the day, or like do my yoga practice in the morning, like, you know, it kind of, you know, tips into the 10 o'clock hour. Like, I don't feel bad. It's like, I'm going to continue, I'm going to do my work and I'm going to work my butt off and I'm going to work into the evening. And and just do what I have to do to make it work. So.
And I think that's what's cool about a lot of people that are trying to change the way that business is done in the outdoor space is there's this huge like resurgence of entrepreneurial stuff and like hustle hard and you can always work harder, and like this, you know, this message that all these business people are pushing, you know, make more money, work harder. And it's cool to see people being like, yeah, that's part of it, but there's also this other part where you need to have a life and you need to be okay with how much you're working versus how much time you're putting into other things too. Because if you ever put all of your eggs in one basket and, you know, your head's down to the grindstone all the time, you're going to look back and wish you maybe chilled out a little bit more at some point. So
Absolutely. I think I read an article recently, I don't even remember what it was, but it's kind of to that point of like the whole hustle thing and how it's just so overrated. And everybody thinks that like, you know, they can get away with like 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. Like your brain can't handle that. It needs 8 hours. It needs 7 to 8 hours, like period. And like, that's like the whole new thing that I've been reading is like with entrepreneurs and people that are running big businesses is like, they have to get their sleep. You know, it's like when you go in and, you know, after you work till 2 a.m. and you say you sleep for 4 or 5 hours and you get up and your brain, you're just not reset. You know what I mean? You're not ready to go at a level that's like peak. So I think like sleep, rest, eating right, doing, you know, exercising, all that stuff is just like a recipe for success for sure. So I think that whole hustle thing, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. Cause like, you know, like you said, it's like, that's like a part of like what's happening in our society too. But I do think that on the other side, there is sort of a mindful thing happening too, also with just like taking care of yourself. Like you have to take care of yourself. You can't just like drink coffee all day long and like, just like think you're just going to be like cool forever. And I think that like, you know, with like kids and, you know, kids that are thinking about like getting into startups and things like that. And like, they have the gusto, they definitely have the youth on their side, but it's like, you're going to hit a wall. Like if you don't treat your body with respect, like you're going to hit a wall. It's just a matter of time, you know? So I think everybody needs to be a bit more conscious about like themselves. Cause if you're not at peak, you know, then everything else isn't going to hit peak. So
it was funny that you brought up the sleep thing too, because I was reading some statistic like a couple months ago where they were talking about how as a human, if you only get 6 hours of sleep consistently for a week, it has the same cognitive effect as if you were drunk. So it's like, no wonder when we're in an office setting that people are making all these stupid decisions. It's like majority of these people haven't gotten any sleep and they're acting like they're just hammered. So
totally. No,
yeah,
totally.
I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Well, sweet. Yeah. So has it been weird kind of like putting yourself out there and being a little bit more of the face of the company and sharing your story after having, you know, kind of helped other people build their brand a little bit more for so long?
Yeah, for sure. And especially for me too, like I'm sort of a private person. I'm not like Mr. like check me out. So, but I kind of had people talk me into it a little bit, which which was cool because I mean, ultimately I know how it is. Like when I go and like search online or I find a new brand or, you know, something that I'm like stoked on. And then I like go in and read the about and like hear about the founders and what they're into and what they're all about. It just makes me like be more stoked on the brand, you know? So I think that it's that whole part of the transparency. It's like, if I were to go in there and like, we were to be all secretive about who we were, I don't feel that it really would, you know, lend to the whole, you know, the bigger idea of like what we're trying to accomplish here. And you know, because at the end of the day also too, it's like we're sort of, me and Derek are sort of the target market, you know, for the brand also. So it's like, you know, I feel like what we went through and what we're going through as human beings can really lend a hand to other men or guys that are like maybe scared about yoga or think it's just like, you know, still for women, which it truly is not. And, you know, if we can help open that door to guys in a way that's like showing that like, hey, it's cool. Like, it's cool, dude. You're okay. Like, you're not going to like turn into a chick when you walk out the door, you know, like, and most of the time when guys go in and actually do it or give it like a week or whatever, they just like come out just like, holy shit, that's the gnarliest thing I've ever done. Like, I had no idea, you know, they're just like completely humbled. So And I'm like, a lot of the time I'm like, told you so, and then the guys that like really adapt it and like stick to it, it's like, it's a life changer, and I mean, the reason why I got into yoga in the beginning was really to allow me to surf the way I want to surf, or like, like my ego as an aging, man, like, I want to be able to just do the things that I want to do at a level that I want to do it at. And this has been like my gateway ticket, because it's changed everything else in my life. Like my eating habits, my drinking, like alcohol, like all that stuff has been just completely like changed forever, and I'm so much more in tune with my body, and I'm so much more in tune with my mental state. And that's all through yoga, meditation, and mindfulness, basically. So I recommend it highly.
It was cool too that you kind of mentioned a little bit right there, and a little bit previous in our conversation too, is how you had looked at potentially starting another action sports brand, and how you weren't in tune with what 15-year-olds were doing. And I think it was cool that you had come to that crossroad and made the decision to create something that was more along the lines of what you connected with yourself now, because there's a lot of people that would, do the complete opposite and say, okay, well, the money's where the kids are, and so I'm going to go back and try and do this thing. And now there's this huge rift between who you are and how you view the world versus these other people, and it creates this whole weird dynamic with how you're running the company and that whole deal. So yeah, it was just cool to hear that you had kind of used the gateway of yoga to branching into this other thing, and how it kind of feeds back into who you are as a person and what you're experiencing now, versus trying to go some other route.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was only natural for me, like, and for us. So just because it's almost like looking in a mirror and like, what do we want? What would we be into, and how would we want things to be done? Or, so it's been easy that way, because in retrospect with like Volcom, I was at 18 the target customer then. So I was literally living it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's exactly how it is right now. Like, I'm living what we're talking about. Like, we're living it, so I feel like there's a lot of just authenticity. I mean, I hate that word because it's so overused these days, but it's maybe it's more like honesty or truthfulness, or I don't know. But it's where we're at basically in our lives. So it's easier for us to talk about it. It's easier for us to, it's not like we're trying. It's not like we're trying to get in the mind of a 15-year-old and then doing study groups and like, what is he thinking, or what is that kid thinking? And, and the jury's out of like, of this market of like, hey, is there enough dudes that, can we build a business, like a profitable, like cool, nice business from this? Like, jury's out for sure still, but and looking and looking, diving into it, it's like we did our homework, and I mean, the market's only growing for men. It's just, it's like we're eating away at that women's market a little bit. So I feel like there's definitely a space for it. And I don't want to be a massive, like, I don't want to be the biggest company. I want to be like the raddest and best company. I'm not, I already went through a public, company with Volcom and like doing that whole thing. And it's hard, man. It's challenging, and it definitely changes the dynamics of, of the business. And so I did that, and it was an incredible experience, and I would never change it for the world. But but now it's just totally different. It's just a different sort of mindset for us.
Yeah, and not to downplay any decisions that you've made in your life, but it also seems like you've kind of been able to like make moves that are more closely related to like heart or gut. Did you ever, have you ever questioned that feeling at all? Or because I feel like there's a lot of people where they get into situations where, something bad will happen and all this stuff gets fucked up in their life, and then, they're kind of grinded down to the bottom, and then they're like, okay, I get it. I really need to be who I am to my core, and let that kind of seep into other stuff. And it seems like you just kind of had that in you from a younger age.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Like, gut's been a huge, like, that's been my like decision maker for most of the big decisions I've made in my life. And, sometimes your gut tells you the wrong thing too. But you know, I think that you got to learn. It's like it comes down to learning as well. But like, I mean, I think gut's a huge part of it, and more often than not, your gut's right. Like more often than not, and sometimes your ego will, you know, overtake the gut and get you into trouble. And I mean, I've done it so many times in my life where it's like my ego says to do something, but my gut's telling me not to, or vice versa, you know, and then I just get in trouble. And I'm like, shit, I should have listened to my gut. You know, it's always right. Like it's usually right, you know, more often than not. So I think gut's a huge part of everything. And it's a feeling, you know, it's definitely gut's a big part of everything.
So how do you go about trying to keep the ego side of it in check whenever you're faced with a more difficult decision like that? Do you turn to yoga, or do you turn to any sort of other thing like surfing that, you know, kind of get you back to that place where you can make that decision a little bit easier?
Yeah, I would say like stepping outside, or, you know, like, because inherently, I think with any like startup or even just anybody in business who's trying to build something, you almost want to like force to fix the problem, like force it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm going to figure it out right now. Like I'm going to right now, you know, but more often than not, it's like, that's only going to, you know, it's going to be a worse decision or whatever, you know? So I think taking a step back, going outside, or, you know, doing some yoga or going surfing, or or like just removing yourself a little bit will help you sort of like come up with a better solution to whatever it is you're trying to accomplish or get through. So, yeah, I think that's kind of, for me, is a big thing, you know, when it comes to that sort of thing, for sure. Just removing
Awesome.
myself from it and just like, don't, and you know, we're our own worst enemy half the time with the ego. So it's like, you gotta always put it in check. And it's hard to do a lot of the time, you know, it's really hard to do. I think it's a lifelong thing with the ego. So, but, if you can, I think the biggest thing is the awareness of like knowing that, that it's the ego that's kind of like being, you know, there, and it's not really like your gut or your true essence. It's like, you know, it's the ego. So if you can be aware of that, that's the first thing. Like if you can be aware that, you know, that your ego is talking or doing something, then that's the first step of like getting a handle on it, I think. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's what I try to do. Like if I, you know, weird things happening with the decision or something that's going on, and I'm like, you know, kind of like reacting versus like responding, or taking a step back to like create some space to like really be able to be mindful of like what it is I want to do, or, you know, I try to just be aware, really. So
Cool. Easier said
yeah,
than done, huh?
it's so hard to do. It's so hard to do. But I think in practice and in time, if you continuously, you know, become aware, it'll just become a new pattern, you know, for you. So
Definitely.
it's gotten
And
better
then
for me.
I kind of glanced over it a little bit too, but how did you guys come up with the name Kazem?
Yeah. So, it came from cosmic, and it's so, yeah, I like wrote it down. It's so weird. Like I wrote it down in one of my journals. Like it's about like Kozm, and and I was like, shit, what are we gonna call this thing? And I like flipped back through the old journal, and I just saw Kozm, and I don't know why I'd written it down, but it was because of cosmic. And then I'm like, holy shit, like this is cool. Like, you know, it just basically comes from cosmos, cosmic, worldly, universal, just like bigger picture, like grandiose, like thoughts. Like that's basically how Cosm came about. But it was literally just me like jotting it down. And yeah, it was funny. I was like, well, there's no way that that's going to be like, you know, I could trademark that, or like that's just two syllables, like KZ, like those are like epic letters, you know what I mean? And just thinking like there's just no way, you know. And then I ended up just doing my due diligence, and I'm like, holy shit, I literally just got the trademark like certificate like a week ago. So it's pretty cool.
Nice. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
Sweet. So what else is coming up next for Kazem? What can you reveal, any sort of insider stuff about what you're working on?
Yeah, we have like a full like fleece program happening right now, coming up. And like we're doing like a zip up hoodie, which is so good, and then a crew, and then we're doing some sweatpants, like some more fitted sweatpants, and then sweat shorts. So we have sort of those four pieces, and then we're actually just about to drop another colorway of the shorts right now, like another limited run, a black colorway, which are going to be super stealth and cool. I'm actually getting them today.
Nice.
And and then we're gonna do some more shorts here coming up too. So excuse me. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. So I'm stoked because the shorts have been well received, and it's like I told you, I think I mentioned before, it's total. They're just so different. Like they're not the drapey sort of synthetic kind of play, which most brands do, from like Lulu on to even Nike and Under Armour and all that. It's just, I mean, it's a upcycled. It's a hemp organic cotton blend with a little bit of stretch. So it's
Cool.
it's a natural short really at the end of the day, and it's a totally different feel. But I mean, I've had like some pretty gnarly yogis practicing them, and they're like super stoked on them. So that's been a huge validation for us. So yeah, we're going to continue another run of those, and yeah. So I mean, that's sort of the immediate right now, and then we got some really cool content that we're working on as well that I didn't mention. We didn't really talk about, but we also give 5% of our sales to like yoga based foundations, and right now we're doing it with this guy Dan Nevins, who's a double amputee who got his legs taken off in Iraq and from an explosion in his Hummer, and he found yoga and mindfulness and just completely changed his life. He was basically on the verge of like PTSD. Well, he was a PTSD and verge of suicide and things like that. Anyways, he's been introducing yoga to a lot of vets, and it's just been like an incredible thing that we've been a part of. And I found him literally on social media through Instagram, and I contacted him and wanted to see if he wanted to be involved. And I was super into his cause and him bringing awareness to other vets. And he's basically working to build a retreat center out in Florida where vets will come and practice mindfulness yoga and golf, and there's like a farm and all this sort of thing. So really help these guys heal, because it's been proven that it's just a huge advocate for their healing. I mean, they get pumped with their drugs and things like that, all the hospitals, and it's kind of like masking, but really when it comes down to it, this whole mindfulness thing has really been like a big mover for them. So that's cool. And then we went out to North Carolina last year, and we shot a really cool piece on him and some other vets. So we're going to be putting that thing out, which is going to be really emotional, I think, for people. And then we're working on, working with other groups where yoga is a really, it's a healing tool for a lot of these people. I mean, everybody thinks about like, in the Western world, yoga is like this, like, women's thing in their like Southern California in their Range Rovers, and like, that sort of like that's the stereotypical yoga. But like for people that like really like need it, like when it comes to, like the vets or people with brain injuries or people in prison, like this tool is like no other, excuse me, I got something stuck in my throat. But it's been pretty cool to like align ourselves with a few of these groups and work with them on a level that's just been like intimate, and really where we can see that it really helps them, helps these people. And the whole prison community is crazy, like how the whole yoga and mindfulness meditation thing is just changing, guys' life, because 97% of guys, or something crazy, it's a crazy statistics of guys will re-enter our society. So, how do you want them to enter back into society as just like this, like fighting, ex-con type of character that's just going to basically go right back in, or give them a little bit of peace of mind behind the walls and, enter back into society with a different perspective, and hopefully more intuitive about themselves. And so anyways, that's a really big piece of our puzzle. And again, it's just something that like I feel good about and feel good doing and contributing in a way that's going to hopefully help these guys, and then also telling their stories. So I think once you see this Dan Nevins piece, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that all sounds really awesome. You're gonna have to let me, or drop me a link when that piece comes out so I can share it.
For sure, man.
And then based on all of that stuff, just to kind of wrap things up, with everything that you've kind of done with Volcom and that you are doing currently with Kazem, what kind of advice would you give somebody that's either trying to follow in your footsteps or, just pursue something that is close to their own goals?
I would say just go for it. Like don't be scared. Just like you got to just like give it a shot. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You can go get another job, or it's like, I think you need to just put yourself out there. Like I said before, I mean, there's no other way to experience success or failure than to do it. Like you got to give it, you got to try it. You got to just like, you got to go for it. And I think that's where growth happens. And I mean, you hear it all the time, right? It's like, how many failures are there till there's like actual success? It's like a lot usually. And those are the things that like most people don't hear about. And I think that those are the most important pieces in your life, is like how you bounce back from failure. So even if you do fail, you're going to learn a ton and apply, take what you learn and apply that to your next situation. But I would just say ultimately, just don't even be scared. Just like go for it. Just like make it happen. Just do it. Beg, borrow, steal. Just get it going. Do it.
Awesome. Great to hear. And then where can people find more of the Kozm stuff if they're looking for you guys online?
I mean, our site, it's thekozm.com, THEKOZM.com, and just Instagram and Facebook, and all the links are just on our site right there. So that's basically like our hub right now is our site, really.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Well, sweet. We're going to have to get together again in the future and catch up and see what you guys have in store, because I know you've already made a bunch of really cool small little moves, and it'll be sweet to see it all kind of stack onto itself.
Heck yeah, man. I really appreciate the opportunity. Super stoked to talk to you.
Yeah, anytime. And if I can help out with anything in the future, let me know.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Have a great rest of your day.
Hey, you too, bro.
Peace.